Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to share this real quick. What's up, guys? That's excellent. The first comment was Bliss, please let me see the kids. Joke's on you. I am permanently team no kids. Hi, everyone. What's happening? What's up, Saeed? How are you? Cool. So we have a ton of stuff to do here. The way that the live streams work now is that everyone who's on the $9 and up tier on Patreon gets to submit questions for weekly live stream, and then I come on the live stream and answer those questions. So, what's up, Simon? Um, so that's what we're going to be doing. We have a lot of really good questions because a lot of really cool, smart people are in the Patreon Discord, which is, by the way, like a freaking party. I have loved being on that. It's been like the Discord server. I mean, obviously it's like my Discord server, but like it's the one that I have enjoyed the most by far. It's just a bunch of like really knowledgeable people about like fashion and a bunch of other stuff, just hanging out and talking 24/7. It's lovely. It's small enough that it's not like super chaotic, but it's large enough that there's like a lot of cool people there. There's a lot of variety in what we talk about and what goes on. So I'm going to open up those live stream questions, and yeah, we're going to keep this one limited to about 30 minutes or so. But yeah, that's what it is. And also, if you haven't joined my Patreon, you definitely should, so that we can get more episodes to you quicker. Stuff from the Margella series and all of the stuff. What's up, Ra? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, first question was someone was like, well, I feel like you should probably talk about the Virgil quote statement thing that he gave to Dazed. So, if you're, I mean, I imagine that just about everybody is aware of at least the soundbite from this, but the full question was Dazed is doing like a big like decade roundup thing, and there's an interview with Virgil. The question he was answering was, what do you think will happen to the idea of streetwear in the 2020s? And he said, wow, I would definitely say it's going to die, you know? Like, its time will be up. In my mind, how many more t shirts can we own? How many more hoodies? How many more sneakers? I think that we're going to hit this, like, really awesome state of expressing your knowledge and personal style with vintage. There are so many clothes that are cool, that are vintage, that are in vintage shops, and it's just about wearing them. I think that fashion is going to go away from buying a box fresh something. It'll be like, hey, I'm going to go into my archive. Um, the thing that first hit me when I first read that was saying like, well, that's really easy for someone to say who has like a huge, extensive, incredible archive, because I I don't know. I own a lot of clothes. I do not have like a beautiful, deep, rich, and like history-driven archive by any means. Um, but yeah, it also made me think about the fact that um, vintage is something that we're all very hyper aware of, and that almost seems like it's reaching its saturation point in like cool fashion circles where like I mean people like Owen Hyatt and stuff have like really pushed us towards this idea of like, oh yeah, like buying archival stuff or whatever, and that like it sort of feels so big in like the fashion community right now that it almost maybe seems like a bubble that's about to pop. But really I think what it's more indicative of, and what this Virgil quote reminded me of, is that it's only big because this is like our subculture, and we don't really I at least can get into kind of a bubble sometimes, and I don't realize what's happening in larger culture. And that for the most part, when people say like, "Oh, I need like new clothes," the concept of buying secondhand clothes like is not a thing for just about everybody. Um, I'm gonna try this real quick because like I look a little bit like a ghost. I'm gonna see if this fixes it. What is this? Beam. Oh, no, I don't want like an Instagram filter. I just want something that's gonna like calm down my skin tone. Yes, go. Nope, didn't work. Okay. Um, I just tried. There's like a magic wand like icon right here that is that I thought would just be like a thing where it's like, are you really pale? Do you want the lighting to calm down in this room? But it didn't really do that. Um, but yeah, I wonder if we will get to a place where there's kind of like a grailed for regular people where they're able to dependably like shop older vintage stuff and that be like a thing that everyone does. That would be kind of interesting. Because yeah, it does seem like there have been so many clothes that have come out that you could just sort of forever keep digging back into the backlog of fashion and find just more and more and more and more and more incredible stuff. Let's see what you guys have kind of said about this as I've moved along here. That's all people saying, hey, Bliss. While Virgil specifically talking about vintage designer clothing when he said that? I took it to mean more widely encompassing statement covering all vintage clothing, no matter what the brand. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, old Comme des Garçons, of course, said Andre. Yeah, I love old Comme des Garçons. I wish that I could wear any of it because I'm 6'2" and almost none of it fits me. The old stuff. Appreciate brands like Bodie are doing. Yeah, some Sam brought up that Bodie is doing like one-off pieces out of recycled fabrics. Bodie is choice stuff, and Bodie is sort of like getting that idea done, that Virgil idea done, but sort of in a different way because she's designing new clothes technically, but they are out of materials that are older. I didn't even realize Arturo was in here. What's up, Arturo? I completely agree. I think that people misinterpreted what Virgil said. Yeah, it's the same problem as literally every other part of the internet where people are reading a headline and saying like, Virgil said streetwear will die. Fuck you, Virgil. I like my hoodie. And then, it's hard to make people actually read things. I feel like streetwear is not as big as it's being perceived by Virgil, to be honest, since most people don't think of it as deeply as people in the community, you know? I don't know, just my opinion. Yeah, but I mean, like if you look at things right now, I mean, like all of the stuff that like we've moved on from streetwear, like the like male fashion online nerd community, a lot of the stuff that we've moved on to is something that is very ahead of the trend right now. Like, I mean, if you look at people looking to like celebrities for inspiration and stuff, they're looking at like Travis Scott and they're looking at like Playboy Cardi and stuff. And those guys are still very firmly grounded in the like sneakers are the only shoes you can wear, like kind of vibe. So I don't know. I think streetwear is it is the dominant part of the men's fashion conversation right now. That's why there's so many like collabs and there's so many sneaker releases and why so many brands are still doing joggers and stuff. And like to us, it feels like kind of like almost like old fashioned at this point. But I mean, not if you're just looking at the money. So. I used to find a pair of pants and some shirts, hoodies, belts, rings from grandparents' DIY chains, all that, and I felt I was evolving my true self. That feeling is streetwear. That's a really good point. Kristen said, I think streetwear is going out of style, but I think that Americans have some time before they go vintage. Yeah, Americans are really really tied to this idea of new clothing. I was talking to a former coworker back when I was also doing private client styling, and I told her, it was like, oh, you should just like buy stuff on the real because it would be like so much cheaper for you. And this woman who is like my age looked at me and was like, but those are like clothes that other people have owned. And I was like, yeah, I mean, most of it's like, a lot of it's like brand new, like they haven't even removed the tags yet. But yeah, I mean, technically some of it's like used, technically. And she was like, that's disgusting. I would never wear something that someone else has had on their body. And I think I like actually like laughed out loud a little bit at her because that's just such a dumb, that's dumb. I don't know. I'm not sure there's a whole lot else to say about that. But yeah, Americans are super locked in to this idea of like, I can only buy brand new clothes from the Target. A lot of people can't just go into Goodwill and wear something because of germs. I don't blame them. Yeah, but like Goodwill and things like the Real Real and stuff, like those are pretty different. Like I understand that, yes, like Goodwill, like you would sort of need to like zap the clothing and like put it through like a dry cleaner or like wash it yourself or something. But I mean, like the Real Real, like I literally get stuff from them and I've probably bought like 30 things from the Real Real before, and all of it like I just like immediately put on. It didn't feel gross or smell gross and wasn't gross. Like I don't know. If truly now, like I have people in my family who are like very actual real germaphobes, and like it heavily affects their life in a negative way. Um, I do understand that, barring that, like because that's a real situation that's like not a joke. But yeah, barring stuff like that, there are definitely ways for you to get used clothes that are not gross. Um, yeah, John Lacey just brought up that Maureen Sarah is like doing similar stuff to this. She's kind of in the same boat as Bodhi, as like using the vintage fabrics and stuff. And um, yeah, Arturo asked how Bodhi's pronounced, and it's Bodhi because her name is Emily Bodhi, and so I've heard her herself say that. Um, Yeah, Digicen just said in Eastern Europe, where I'm from, vintage is not a style; it's a necessity. Yeah, um, which is cool. Like I'm sure that that has its own things that you may not like about it. Um, Certainly, like the ability to not be able to choose, that does not sound like a great situation to be in. But I'm sure there's lots of like cool stuff that can come out of that. The thing that makes me really interested about that is like with when for areas and places and like people who like have to wear secondhand stuff, like even in the States, like younger kids who have to wear secondhand stuff because their parents just won't buy them new stuff. Like, how do those kids like express frustration and like youthful rebellion and stuff through clothes that they have no control over? That's what's really interesting to me. um, when like kids are able to like find or like make pins, or they like paint on the clothes, or they like wear them in some like very fuck you kind of way. That to me is what's really really interesting about like being forced to wear secondhand and like vintage stuff. um, what else? A couple more things and we'll move on to another question. Most street So May Styles said most of the streetwear inspos actually stem from what celebrities, specifically American, wear. Here in London, we are so into our vintage. The transition from streetwear to vintage has happened. Oh yeah, that's probably true. And in general, like I think, I don't know. This is sort of a broad statement about Americans, but I'm American, so I'll make it and not feel bad. I feel like America has our whatever culture we have is so new still. Like obviously it's been more than a lifetime, but like two old ladies living back to back, that it's then the Civil War. Like that's it's we're still culturally, especially, we are so new, um, that I think we just have less of an appreciation, just a off top understanding about the value of vintage. Whereas like in if you live in one of the old empires, like there's so much history around you all the time and so much respect for the past, that's built into like the damn law over there. Like I mean, as an American going to Western Europe or even parts of Eastern Europe and stuff, like the amount to which the government is trying to preserve the history, even at the expense of like regular life happening. Like in Rome, there's like they have a subway system, but it's like barely a subway system because they're so scared that they're gonna like tear something up that's buried. And so they just like don't dig any more subways, and it's like, all right, cool, we got to figure out other ways of transporting people. Um, so I feel like that makes it where the idea of like let's find vintage clothes and find a way to express ourselves using the things of the past. I feel like that is a much more like one-to-one. That's a short trip for a lot of Europeans, I would think. Whereas for Americans, it's like a whole concept that we have to like sort of like start from square A on. Whew, very long answer. Somebody brought up I'm trying to figure out if I should do this or not. Somebody brought up Galliano and his anti-Semitic freak out that he had. The exact question was, I've been thinking about Galliano and his anti-Semitic rants like 8 years ago or whatever. He's apologized and he's done stuff to try to make it right, and his efforts have been lauded by the Anti-Defamation League. Do we separate the art from the artists? Do we forgive? How do we know? Do we know of any other examples of controversies in the fashion industry of people being discriminatory? A, who were forgiven by the industry, or B, who were not forgiven? That's a good question, and the first thing that occurred to me to respond to that with is to read from my favorite fashion book, Gods and Kings, which is about the lives and the either death or the breakdown of Alexander McQueen and John Galliano. It literally switches chapter to chapter from Lee's life to John's life, and I'm just going to read from the introduction because this outlines what in the police report they know John Galliano said, and I had actually never heard any of this stuff before, so trigger warning, this is all pretty racist and intense. But we're just going to read about like a page and a half here, so you could probably like dip out for like 3 minutes and you'd be good. On the evening of February 24th, 2011, 35-year-old Geraldine Bloch, the head of exhibitions at the Paris Institute of the Arab World, and her boyfriend, 41-year-old Philippe Vergetti, who worked as a receptionist, were sitting on the terrace of the Paris Café La Perle, chatting over a couple of beers, and the man next to them yelled to quiet down. Realizing that he was drunk, his eyes were glassy and his speech was slurred, they brushed him off, but he kept needling them. Quote, "Your voice is annoying me," he snarled. "You're speaking too loudly." The drunk man's bodyguard, standing a few feet away, saw that the situation was quickly devolving into a fight and that Bloch was getting upset. He rang his boss's lawyer on a cell phone and tried to pass the phone to Bloch so the lawyer could calm her down, but she refused to take the call. Hang on one second. Hey, babe.
Hey, sorry.
It's all good. I'm doing a live stream right now.
Oh, hi, everybody.
Lindsay says hi, everybody. Continuing. A security guard suggested that she move to another table, which is great. Obviously, you always, in the case of racial bigotry, want to ask the person who is being attacked to move, which is, that was sarcasm. That's clearly not what you want to do. But yeah, security guard fucked up and asked the woman to move. And then before she could, going back to the book here, before she could, the drunk man grabbed her hair and shouted, okay, so before she could, the drunk man grabbed her and shouted, quote, "Dirty Jew face, you should be dead." She screamed in pain, then again, quote, "Shut your mouth, dirty bitch." He snapped, "I can't stand your dirty whore voice." And then he turned his anger towards Vergetti and yelled, "Fucking Asian bastard, I'll kill you." So this goes on like this for a while, to where like there's a lot of things where like on Twitter and stuff, like cancel culture things, which sometimes are more effective and like well targeted, and sometimes like can be a little bit looser and less targeted. There are things where like people are accused of like racial bigotry, and they you actually read the statements, and it's like one of those things where it's like I can understand why that would be hurtful, but I really don't think that that person intended it to be like that. This is not one of those examples at all. I did not realize, because I was actually doing a study abroad trip when this happened at Galliano, and I remember being in Vienna, Austria, and reading about this on my laptop in my apartment and being like, oh wow, apparently some really crazy stuff was said. But at least in all of those, maybe just the police report hadn't been filed yet, and so like or it hadn't been processed yet, and so they just didn't include those quotes. But like, I did not realize before I read this book that he was that out of control with it. So I mostly want to turn this around to you guys. Chat got very quiet. um, yeah, some heavy stuff there. Mostly want to turn this around to you guys. I don't know a whole lot off the top of my head about what John Galliano has done as far as rehabilitation. I know that he's like very publicly talked about being an alcoholic and an addict, and that there was of course things about like the schedule at Dior, and the book goes into a lot of details about like the amount of pressure that was on him, and the fact that like the way he was working and like the different things that had been set up in his life, he like wasn't living like a normal person at all. Like he went down into the subway for research one time, and like he like said to his friend like, oh yeah, I've never been on a subway before, and just stuff where it's just like he was extremely bubbled in, and he was very fully disconnected from what we would call real life, I guess. Obviously to him it was real life, but very disconnected from things. But yeah, he the only thing that I found here immediately is him expressing contrition at where is this? Him apologizing to the Jewish community at large, which sounds, I don't know. This is sort of like I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Because like it to me, like I have such a hard time if the person is famous, understanding what would I want them to do. Do I just want them to like get hit by a car and die now? Like, do I want them to apologize and give a lot of money? Do I want them to bring it up every time they are speaking publicly? Um, what what does, and I think this person asked this question in a really poignant way. What is someone supposed to do who said, I mean, that's some very intense stuff to say. What do you do to apologize when you say that and it is captured and exposed to the public? Let's see if anybody has answered that already. Looks like somebody came in while I was reading from the book. Somebody was like, what the fuck is going on? Again, those were comments from John Galliano that got him fired from Dior. Was the body there to protect John or to protect other people from him? I think in that case, it's the bodyguards there to protect John, because when you're living in Paris, I think the culture of fashion designer is much different than it is here in the United States, and I think you're kind of a little bit more of a celebrity over there. What's up, Kevin? Not gonna lie, I think the collab has been good for Dior. Definitely out of their comfort zone, something to liven the brand. Okay, that's people talking about sneakers. I hope he gets help. He sounds like an alcoholic with anger sometimes when people are
at their lowest, you have to treat them with kindness. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I think, I don't know, it's weird because like, yeah, like with mental illness and like alcoholism and stuff, like it is, especially for like one's personal life, it is. I found it to be a lot more helpful to think of the person as being like physically sick than to try to think of it as something where they're not able to control themselves or they're doing it because they want to do it or whatever. But it is a pretty different thing when you have someone who's in a position of power that is a public leader and they have a lot of influence and they have a lot of authority and they're in a place where they are that vulnerable and that low and they're reacting in that way because of that vulnerability and lowness. I think it lands a little bit differently than somebody saying hurtful things like who's like your brother or something and they're just like saying it to you like over text or something. I think this is a bit of a different situation than that. Yeah, Jagmeet Magnat. Not sure how to say your name exactly. Sorry, I probably totally butchered it. But yeah, definitely Dior. That's why I was holding the book and reading from it. um, um, Derek said, you do have to apologize repeatedly through public interviews, then maybe the public will forgive you if that's even what the offender wants. I think John Galliano very much wanted approval of the public. I think he is, through reading this, I found a lot of similarities between like myself and like him and Lee in that I think he wants, this is the one similarity I noticed between me and him, is that he emotionally needs approval from other people. Like he's kind of constantly digging around and looking for constant affirmation from like colleagues and from the press and all this, and from his business bosses and stuff, like the people that like Bernard Arnault, who hired him to be at the head of Dior and stuff. Like he very much wanted Dad to say good job, and like I think he very badly wanted a redemptive element of all of that. Hey, here we go. Maximilian Kilworth, who is my homie, said, as someone who isn't Jewish, I feel it's not really my place to accept John's apology. Did John ever make donations to any Jewish charities? I believe he did. I was trying to research this a little bit, but I'm going to leave it at, I don't know for sure, but I believe he did. That he's done a lot of work and that he's like spoken with a lot of rabbis and that he's, and I don't think the approach has been like a one and done situation with that either. I think, if you think about it, dude was super successful designer. He was thought of as like sort of the king of like fantasy fashion design, and head of like the biggest luxury house in the world. He was like king fashion guy, and then he got fired, and then guys, for years he had no job. Like he wasn't doing anything. So I mean, that obviously gave him some time to do some recovery work, and I don't know, it's impossible to know. As the public, it's impossible to know if somebody's like in a state of constantly relapsing or whatever, but yeah, he had a lot of time. So I imagine that he did want to go back and do something to get his job back. But yeah. Lindsay Foster, live from the other room, said, true reconciliation cannot come from a single apology. It's a start, though, and a crucial one. And yeah, I mean, there's some pretty heartbreaking stuff where he's like an interview that I saw a while ago of him speaking on some news interview show thing, where he, I think, publicly talks about it for the first time, and he totally, first of all, like for him, like totally toning down his outfit, I think was an important piece of all of that, which I'm sure was given to him as advice. You can't wear anything crazy. You need to wear a black suit. And he yeah, I mean, he seemed very contrite, but it's like, again, what do we want from these people? How does someone come back from saying horrible, terrible things like that? Um, there are paths to doing that, and it seems so much more simpler if you are talking about a personal relationship, of somebody being like an alcoholic and an addict and stuff, and then there are ways to, and maybe you don't ever get like forgiveness from somebody that you've hurt, but like there seems to be a much clearer path for people to mend things one on one with somebody. But I mean, to be a person who is Jewish and to read a statement like that, not even like the woman that he yelled at, but like to be just a Jewish person in Europe and to read that, like, oh my gosh, that is a wildly hateful thing to say. And then to not know the guy personally, to not be particularly interested in fashion, like, what could that person say or do that would make you say, well, he does seem like he's sorry. I will forgive this person that I know very little about other than his maybe former hatred for Jewish people. Like, it's very complicated trying to. This is John Galliano, Isabel. Let's see if we have any other good comments here. The whole donating to some charity that's vaguely related to the hurt group always seems so bizarre to me. Like, what does that prove exactly? I think the idea of that is it's sort of like when a company gets sued by an individual. It's that, like, a company, a corporate entity can't apologize to someone that it's hurt physically or emotionally or whatever. And so the idea is that the closest that you can get to apology for abstract ideas like a business apologizing or a celebrity apologizing is to say, like, okay, well, the one thing that everybody doesn't seem to want to do is to, like, give up substantial amounts of money. And so I think that's the idea of that, is that, like, you, like, as a Jewish person in, wherever, like, in just a random part of the world, is not probably going to be affected positively by John Galliano giving money to a synagogue or whatever. But I think the idea there is that it's like, I am willing to show contrition by giving, I have no idea how much money he gave, but let's say, like, to someone who is extremely comfortable in Europe, giving like $4 million to, like, this, like, Jewish community group that is targeting it towards the group. I guess it is targeting it towards the group, and they don't have that money anymore. So I think that's the idea. So, Mike, we're talking about John Galliano and all of the wildly anti-Semitic stuff that he yelled that got him fired from Dior, and talking about what people in situations like that can do to get forgiveness from the public. So,
Can I chime in with a hot take?
oh yeah, here, Lindsay wants to chime in on this, please.
So, I think with stories of reconciliation, it's less about wanting to, like, get forgiveness, and more about wanting to acknowledge the harm done, and to take action to differentiate oneself from the way one behaved in that instant, to understanding and empathizing with other people, and trying to show progress moving forward. Because I've been reading some of the comments and saying, it doesn't matter, he makes clothes, and I'm not trying to shade you for that interpretation, or these problems aren't real. Anti-Semitism is a real thing.
Yeah.
We've seen massive abuses of Jewish people because of anti-Semitic comments and othering and making people not human.
And like recently too. Like,
Yeah.
that's not just
It's not an ancient history.
Yeah,
thing.
this was something I actually had a big misunderstanding about until like the last 5 years. Like that is very much still happening now, and it's happening in the United States, and it's happening in Western Europe, and like that is still a thing. And if you're not Jewish, it's very difficult for you to, like, identify, like, see it in real life. But
Yeah.
if you are a Jewish person, I think it's pretty
blindingly
Well,
obvious.
if you look at it from a theory perspective, one of the theories is titled queer theory, and it's not exclusively the study of LGBTQ individuals, but it's anyone who is identified as other from the mainstream. So, like in an American context, the mainstream is, white, Protestant, middle class, whatever. That is considered normal, and anybody who falls outside of that becomes other. And the words that we use have power. Words mean things, and so to make an anti-Semitic comment, even if you're just a person who makes clothes, you are dehumanizing somebody, and that dehumanizing thing from any kind of platform allows for worse and worse treatment of people that you don't consider as fully human. And that's really the harm of, well, that's some of the harm of this instance, is somebody who's a public figure, who is known for their art, who has a platform, who othered someone in a way, in the comments about their appearance or their belief system or whatever.
Oh, he just said he was going to kill them because they're Jewish. Like he was about.
Right.
He was about.
This is a very extreme example.
Yeah.
But like, for example, the phrase,
like-
the term that gets used a lot in slang when one is taken advantage of or comes off worse in a deal, to be gypped. Please don't use that term. That's incredibly it's awful. Talking about Gypsy or the Romani people, who are a real people group, but when you use that as that racial stereotype or that cultural stereotype, that does cause harm. And I'm not trying to like jump in here and take over the Fashion Friends hangout, but just my context, as I work in a museum, we're constantly challenging these systems of oppression, how they manifested in a historical past, how they've evolved, and how they continue. And so this is something that, for me, I'm dealing with stories of reconciliation and redemption arcs that haven't come to their full conclusion all the time, in terms of race or class or gender or the expressions of any of these things. So it's more, you're more than a person who does a thing. Like when we talk about people in a historical context, or we talk about ourselves, when we talk about people in history or public figures, we tend to focus on one element of them. And we forget that they're a full human, with fingernails and all those other elements to them. And so I really love this conversation about, Galliano. Somebody else said that he had lost their respect forever. Still makes really beautiful clothes, but I understand that. How do you separate the artist from their art? Is that something you should aim for? Is there always going to be the asterisk of J.K. Rowling's work as being really problematic because of her own views that do come out through her writing and do come out through her art? You cannot separate these two entities entirely. That is to miss out on the interpretation of the whole thing, and that's something I think you do a lot with these videos of analyzing these runway shows and things. Is you are understanding these people in their context, what's going on in their lives, and so I think Galliano and his arc as it continues is a really interesting way to explore that. But thank you for letting me interrupt. I will
Yeah,
leave
thank you.
you to it.
Thank you. So let's move on. What are we at? Oh, we've already gone over time. Okay, well, we're
My fault.
no, it's not. No, I we were over time before you even came out here. This is an interesting one. We'll end on this question. We got a lot more questions from other Patreon subscribers, but that just means that we have plenty to do next week now. Are there any brands where a designer left or died and the next designer made the brand better from a design perspective? Uh-oh. Sorry. I think maybe we got... Sorry. Are there any brands where a designer left or died and the next designer made the brand better from a design perspective? Clearly the answer here is Helmut Lang. As soon as they got that guy out of there, they were free to fly. Great stuff. As long as Helmut isn't there, it was great. But gosh, that guy was clogging the pipes. I tell you. No. Can anyone think of any example where that's happened? Because I feel like the whole thing about a brand is that the original designer is going to be the person that is going to be there. Okay, so arguably Y Project. Johann Savati did incredible avant-garde work, but Y Project now is commercially next level. Yeah, and I would say that, avant-garde in a art term, maybe Y Project isn't that, but avant-garde in a fashion context, absolutely. Like Y Project is a great avant-garde brand and like a fun one too, which is very rare in avant-garde. Eddie after Yves Saint Laurent, I don't. So this is okay. So that's a good point. So Eddie after Yves Saint Laurent, Eddie probably made it. I wouldn't doubt it if like he was more financially successful than the man Yves Saint Laurent. But I don't know if we can make that comparison really because Yves was designing at a time when I mean like there was no ready to wear. Like Yves created ready to wear. So like there was no ready to wear. There was so much more demand for like gowns. And the same thing someone just brought up, Givenchy and Lee McQueen. Like, I don't think we can really draw these comparisons because it is such a different world that they're designing in. And I mean, when Hubert de Givenchy died, like people were crying in the streets of Paris. It was a big fucking deal when Hubert died. Like that was no small thing. These people were like legends, and like right now they're just like coffee table books in Barnes and Noble. I realize, but like these people, Yves was like a fucking rock star when he was alive. When he was like 30 and designing there, like he was huge. But yeah, I think basically to do this comparison, you have to do like who succeeded them right after their death. I don't know if you can go like 3 generations forward and then start comparing these two people who lived in totally different periods of human history. That's the only like qualification I would give to this question. Fendi is elevating without Carl right now, in my opinion. Might be too soon to say, although Carl wasn't the original designer. Silvia Venturini, Fendi, has been turning out. Yeah, I don't like Carl's Fendi at all. I like Karl Lagerfeld as far as a designer is concerned. I think he did a pretty good job overall in his life. He did a wonderful job, really. But I did not like his work at Fendi near the end. The like tracksuits and stuff I thought were some of the worst stuff on Essence at the time. Really liked the comment about Y Project. I didn't know that. That's so cool. Label with his name. Okay, so what else? I haven't seen really early Balenciaga collections, but Demna has been doing a pretty fine job. Yeah, Demna does a great job. He's awesome. I wonder if anyone thinks that Supreme has been better since Brendan Babenzian left. I forget when his last collection was. It was like in 2015, maybe, I want to say. Like brands like Chanel and Dior and all the other maisons that are like football. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's a good point. Someone says Celine after Phoebe. That is a controversial take. I don't know if, I mean, Eddie is such a weird example because Eddie is just like, he just kind of pops in and designs product, and he doesn't really design fashion collections the way that we think about fashion collections. He's really good at product design. He designs product that like everyone just feels like they have to have the jacket or I'm going to die. But like made it better. It's not really made it better. He just made it Eddie. So Phoebe Philo is a great designer of fashion collections, and she's also a really good product designer because that Celine shit is wildly good, and I think it sold pretty well too.
Recommended reading on YSL or Givenchy? No, I don't have any recommended reading about those things. I've really not pursued a lot of knowledge about those eras of fashion, but there's a really good biopic about Yves Saint Laurent's life that I think is just called Eve. Saint Laurent movie. Yves Saint Laurent movie. Oh yeah, the movie's just called Yves Saint Laurent. I thought that was pretty good. It was great for trying to figure out. It was great for trying to sort of like understand the cultural importance that he had. Like it's easy to look back at these old runway shows and be like, oh, that's like the time of my great grandma. Like, yeah, what an exciting time. But this movie sort of helps to sort of underscore the fact that like he was a motherfucking rock star and he was zanned out all day long. Raph Simmons for Jill Sander. You think Raph Simmons did a better job than Jill Sander? That is a super controversial take. Oh, I didn't realize Cal was in here. What's up, Cal? Eddie versus Raph is MJ versus Prince. Prince won. MJ never grew up, which is Eddie repeating the same stuff from 2004. Good comparison. Dang, that was a good analogy. Raph for CK, yeah, that's another weird one because like Raph Simmons is a established fashion designer, and Calvin Klein had very much like kind of like enveloped itself in the warm embrace of the mall brand hug of death, which they're now back to because Raph is gone, and so it's kind of weird comparing like the work of the creative director before Raph, who is totally not like I don't even know who that is, and whoever it is I mean they're gonna be like I design collections for mall brands, so they are ripoffs of designer stuff with like our label on it. So that's kind of a weird example to make, but definitely a true example in that it answers the question. And yeah, I'm feeling Noah to be extremely authentic and beautiful, an authentically grown brand. Yeah, Noah's great. I can't ever find anything wrong with Noah. It's cool. It's a little, I mean, like it's a little boring at times, but like it's kind of what it's supposed to be. It's sort of supposed to be like the skater kid that grows up and becomes a dad kind of brand. A Beautiful Fall is a good book. Saeed reads so many fashion books. This would be the man to listen to be honest. And he recommends A Beautiful Fall. It's about the rivalry between Eve and Karl Lagerfeld. That actually sounds really good. I'm gonna see if there's an audiobook of that. Let's see. Okay, last thing, and then we'll go. Cal, who's one of our patrons and is like a super cool guy and has a very epic collection of clothing, asks, what do we think about designers or brands that only make clothes for thin folks? This is a good question because we're in a place right now in fashion where there are, I think, fewer of those brands because oversized things are very in, and baggy things are very in, and we're playing a lot with shape and proportion. But if you go back to like, I mean, just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, fashion was very locked into skinny fits of things, and in a lot of ways still is locked into skinny fits of things. Like, I mean, Rick Owens stuff. Like, I'm a pretty slim dude, and I don't think I can get in an XL of a Rick Owens like biker jacket. You gotta be real. Well, maybe not. No, because I have friends who are they're not like big guys, but like they like work out a lot and they have bigger arms than me for sure. And I know they can get into some Rick Owens stuff, but I know there's a lot of his stuff that are like totally off limits. Marley, I'm 6'2", and I have a long torso, so that means that I get midriff going on a lot of things.
Cal, I know that Rick does that because Rick's only focus. This is my understanding from just reading a lot in the the private Rick Owens Discord. Rick's exclusive focus when he is designing clothes is this must look the best that it can look. And something that designers have returned to since they first got criticized for making like stylish clothes very small. A miniaturized version of something is going to look better in a photograph than a like larger size of something. Again, right now we're kind of finding things that are exceptions to this because like Balenciaga was the only store that I've ever been into that didn't take the smallest size available of a style of shoe and put it out on the floor. For the triple S's, they only took size 14s and put them out on the floor because they wanted them to look as big and chunky and overwhelming as is humanly possible. But I know that for Rick, when he's cutting the armholes, he's like sitting there like looking at it and saying like, nope, make the armhole higher. Nope, make it higher, make it higher. Because when it's actually on the model, I want it to look like exactly like this dark Prince of Darkness, warlord, super future thing. And so, I mean, it's the same way with like the quality on like his footwear and stuff. There's like people I know who like flip their shit because they bought like Rick shoes and they took them home and they like went on just like a walk in them, like a walk around their neighborhood, and like a piece of hardware chipped off the back. And like, that's just how this stuff is. Like it's the aesthetic of it is always going to be the number one priority in his mind. Yeah, I'm not condoning that necessarily, but I think that is where his mind is at when he's designing stuff like that. In some ways, he's saying that he doesn't want people who are overweight wearing his clothes. I don't think anyone is ever going to admit that that's what they're doing. I do think that is when I worked at Helmut Lang, again, I don't think a single person said that out loud when they were designing the collections. But yeah, like, I mean, they're like our clothes, and there's tons of brands out there whose clothes just fit really fucking small. And, you know, I think it's because they don't want somebody showing up to a party wearing this designer brand that they're trying to like be really exclusive about the look of. They don't want somebody showing up to the party who's like super huge uncool person and wearing their stuff. I think that's where that mentality comes from. And that's super unfair. Like that's obviously like awful. If things are like well designed, then like other people should be able to decide if they look good on them or not. Yeah, Cal, that's true. This is definitely a form of elitism. Yeah, Lindsay said shout out to Abercrombie and Fitch. Yeah. The guy who's like Botoxed and tanned his face so much that he looks like he was born with something wrong with his face. And that guy being like, what? Yeah, someone who is like self-tanned and Botoxed his face into leather, like being at a press conference and saying like, our clothes aren't for uncool kids. Fat kids can't wear our clothes. Like that poor man. I hope he's doing better now that he has been fired from Abercrombie and Fitch. That guy looked, he seriously, like, there's actually, I looked this up. There is like he has no physical abnormalities in his face, but he like has seriously like self-tanned and Botoxed the shit out of his face to the point where it actually looks like, the first time I saw a picture of him, I was like, I shouldn't laugh at this because it's really not funny if like people are born with physical abnormalities in their face. But then I found out that that's not true. Anyway, that guy is a huge dickhead. I think it's because fashion has for a long time been about the imagination and a perception of perfection. That is a true statement, but that is also the exact thing that just made it where Victoria's Secret doesn't get to have their runway show anymore. Marley just said who, I don't know. I need like a intern here that will Google stuff for me. who got fired as Abercrombie and Fitch CEO? Yeah, this fucking guy, Mike Jeffries. His name's Mike Jeffries. He's like he's the one that like was like, oh, well, like our catalog should be like softcore porn, and we should like have like shirtless buff dudes standing outside of our like stores to like give people coupons and stuff. Like that was all this dude.
What were we just talking about?
Oh yeah, someone said that like, oh yeah, so fashion has been about the imagination and the perception of perfection. Yeah, but I don't think the imagination and perception of perfection excludes people who are bigger than like a size 10 or whatever. Sorry. And that's proving to just be true across the industry. Like this is that's something that Victoria's Secret was maintaining very loudly and very publicly for a long time, where people were like, hey, why are there like no trans models in your shows, and like why are there not like women who have like not supermodel bodies sometimes in your shows, like why are you not selecting other supermodels who are like a different size range or something. And like people weren't even like being like you should just put like normal people on your runway or anything like that. That would have been a little bit weird, but like they were just like just use models who are like slightly different than like this like tiny group of women that you use. And Victoria's Secret came out and publicly was like, no, because Victoria's Secret represents the idea of the perfect woman, and those women are not that, so no. And they don't get to do a fashion show anymore because their fashion show is fucking dumb anyway. Like if you've ever looked at pictures of what they were putting out on those shows, it was a garbage fire. It was so dumb. Like I'm like building a career here based on this idea that runway shows are art. Those runway shows, if like all of cinema is art, then this was like the I don't know. It was dumb. I can't think of a good movie example. I was gonna say Transformers, but I was like, oh, I actually know of some very specific ways in which Transformers was very artful in the like design element of it. But yeah, they were just all like just like walking in like bras and panties with like it's like this one's a peacock, this one is like a tree, and this one is like a television set from the 60s. Playful. It was so stupid. Yeah, Cal brought up a good point. Rick does vanity sizing in the other direction. Yeah, that's true, where some stuff is like extremely oversized. But again, I think that's serving the original point that I made of like the aesthetic is king over everything else. If he wants something to be extremely, extremely, extremely oversized, he doesn't want you to be able to size down into it being a slimmer fit of pants. He wants it to be like, no, for these pants, and I can't name any of his pants off the top of my head, but his idea is like, for these pants, they will be oversized. Oh, so somebody said, imagine canceling a fashion show because you're so frustrated about your looks. I imagine you mean like your own looks, like you're so insecure about your own body that you made them cancel a fashion show. That's not what happened. They just weren't making any money off of it. Like the whole idea of the Victoria's Secret fashion show is that it has placement on cable television and that people tune in to watch it so they can sell ad dollars and stuff. Well, their television sponsor dropped them because nobody fucking cared about Victoria's Secret fashion shows because they sucked. Anyway. All right, cool. That's kind of all we have time for today because we're now at an hour, and originally I set out to do 30 minutes on the stream, so I'm sure you've all enjoyed going from a very well-lit room here to me being lit only by my computer monitor. Yeah, I love you all very much. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and
stuff is going to get really good here soon because I filmed the first Margella episode that's going to be premiering for season 5, and it's going to be so good, like very, very good. We have like a lot of incredible imagery and stuff for this one, so there's some really good pieces. His looks are like getting very crystallized, like the Margella that became like the icon is like starting to show in these looks. So yeah, go join my Patreon. It's like a huge party. The lowest tier is $3 a month. Highest tier is $30 a month, which is extremely generous. But yeah, you should go join so that you can get on the Discord and hang out with everybody. Yeah, what Lindsay said, drive safe, drink water. Love you all. Goodbye.